Test. Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much for letting me use your microphone. Good morning. My name is Jule Schnarrenbach. I am facilitating or co-facilitating the conversation we are going to have for the next 90 minutes, roughly. It's titled Youth Innovation Driving Restoration with Education and Technology. And we have a wonderful panel assembled. One person is going to join us a little bit later. But I thank you all for being here and being a part of that conversation. I work with Plant for the Planet as well. I was one of the young people that they've trained very early on and have the honor of now coordinating the delegation that we send to this conference and help other young people get to know the space and take an active role in the process. And you might know Plant for the Planet because we used to give out chocolates at the entrance in the morning, 8 to 9 a.m. If you come early enough, you would have received a chocolate. This year, we say, no change, no chocolate. If you don't deliver, we can't keep giving you chocolate every year. So this year, no chocolate for everyone. It's also way too hot for that. If we see enough action, then next year we can bring some chocolate again, I'm sure. Thank you. I'd like to get to know the audience a little bit before we start, and I'd like to ask you to stand up if you identify as youth. Thank you very much. I appreciate the energy. You can sit back down. Next question. Please get up if you work in education innovation. Great. Thank you very much. You can sit back down. Please stand up if you work in technology. Thank you. A few experts. Who here, can you get up please if you know at least one ecosystem that needs to be restored in your home community? Someone's climbing on the chair. Thank you very much. And the last question, who here works in restoration themselves? A lot fewer people. Thank you so much. You can sit back down. We can see we have a wonderful expert just on my left. He had to stand up every single time. I'm glad you joined us today. We would like to start by showing a short video, if that works. Chris? The video? Is that working? The video is entitled The Place Where Confidence Grows, and it's a short summary of what Plant for the Planet does. So that's the organization that brought loads of 20 young people to the conference this year. And then we'll go to introduce all our wonderful panelists for today. I think we all learned some patience with technology in the past 2 years, so we'll just move to the introductions of speakers first. And maybe we can start with my colleague all the way on the other side. That's Ugratna is joining us to speak a bit about one of these innovations that can help us with restoration.
Story of how a simple idea turned into a global movement which created confidence and optimism. The idea, planting trees to fight the climate crisis. The movement, Plant for the Planet. The confidence, with the help of many and the right tools, we can fight the climate crisis. How did it all start? In 2006, the Billion Tree campaign was initiated by Wangari Maathai, our Mama Miti, and Nobel Peace Prize laureate from Kenya. This was the inspiration for Plant for the Planet to start the biggest economic and peace-building program ever. Wangari Maathai and tens of thousands of Plant for the Planet ambassadors knew that reforestation was not solving the climate crisis, but it was buying the time for humanity to get the problem solved.
Congratulations.
After Wangari passed away, the UNEP handed over her campaign to the children from Plant for the Planet. But that was not all. Live in New York at the UN General Assembly, Felix called for the planting of 1 trillion trees in 2011.
We combine our forces, old and young, rich and poor, and together we can plant 1 trillion trees. We can start 1 trillion tree campaign.
That was the day the Trillion Tree campaign was born. Today, with more than 13 years' experience, Plant for the Planet stands for many successfully implemented global planting events. What helped them get there? The globally rolled out Stop Talking, Start Planting campaign, with its strong call to action, tapped into the feelings of millions of people, inviting them to join the movement. It became the battle cry of people all around the world.
Stop talking and start planting.
But the big breakthrough came with scientific proof. Tom Crowther, a young scientist, answered a question the children asked and nobody was able to answer. How many trees do we need?
Because until recently, we didn't even know the first thing about the global forest system. We didn't know how many trees there were to start with.
In close cooperation with Plant for the Planet, the Crowther Lab at ETH Zurich was built and finally proved that there is room on the planet for 1 trillion trees and that they are the right response to rising temperatures. Hope became certainty.
It's not just about how many trees we plant, but it's also about planting these trees well.
Starting in 2013 on the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, Plant for the Planet shows that high-quality restoration is possible for only €1 per tree. But how do we reach our goal of 1 trillion trees? A question answered by the right tool, the Plant for the Planet app. Invented and programmed by the young people themselves, the app makes it easy to plant trees worldwide and without limitations. The app is open source, free of cost, and without divulging personal data. With this app, you can support tree planting projects from all over the world. No matter if you're an individual, a major corporation, or even a country, you can plant your own forest. And thanks to GPS data and drone imagery, you can even watch your forest growing. Which is why we're so optimistic. One thing is for sure, Wangari Maathai would definitely have been happy to have had such an app. But now, let's stop talking and start planting. In 2020, our campaign goes into the next round with an equally strong key visual and call to action. You might ask yourself, what can I do? The children have a straight answer. Plant your company forest, as many trees as possible. Become part of the campaign. Take a picture of yourself and activate your network. Pass this video to other important leaders and influencers. Thank you for watching.
Thank you so much, Yugratna. We interrupted you mid-second, so please do continue with your introduction.
Thank you, Yule, and yeah, I'm very happy to be here. And much like what Yule mentioned, I'm Yugratna. I also started with Plant for the Planet as a child advocate back in 2009-8, and I work as a staff member at the organization and supporting with a lot of our activities, and very happy to be here. I also, as many of you may know, I serve as policy officer in the major group for children and youth for the eco-stock processes. So that's another mandate which we have been doing, and very honored to be here this morning with a lot of colleagues, friends, and also new people that we are bringing together to our community today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next we have Fernando, who is a student at the University of Granada. Are you okay to introduce yourself as well in 60 seconds?
Hello, I'm Fernando. I'm from Granada, southern Spain. So I'm a PhD candidate on the University of Granada, specifically on governance on forest restoration. That's the topic that I will try to bring you here with all these distinguished panel and distinguished audience. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And next we have Vladimir. Is that correct? Please do introduce yourself as well.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Volodymyr Kravets. I'm a representative of the International Forestry Students Association here as the external counselor. This is an association which unites students from the forestry and related fields over than 60 countries around the globe. And here we're going to talk about our educational process and the impact on the overall situation with the education and restoration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our panelist Philip is joining us at 12:30, and then next to me, John, are you also able to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I think so. Well, I'm not young. I'm 70. Darn. I've been a journalist and an ecologist. I've been to 90 countries. I'm the ecosystem ambassador for the Common Land Foundation, which has 2 million hectares in restoration around the world. And I founded the Ecosystem Restoration Camps movement, which now has 55 camps in 6 continents. And it's growing fast, and we'll tell you more about that soon.
Thank you so much. So we have a wonderful expert panel here, so I won't keep talking, but just throw some questions at you. And John, we would like to ask you first, because we're in the middle of climate change negotiations, and then restoration seems like a small part of the whole picture. So I'd like to ask you why you think ecosystem restoration is important in the climate negotiation space where we are, and how this can be at the heart of solving the triple planetary crisis. Tough question right at the start.
All right. Well, I would say that if you don't ask the right question, you can't get the right answer. And for a very long time, the COP has been discussing things like carbon trading and basically it's power and domination rather than it's about ecology. And so if I study function and dysfunction in terrestrial ecosystems, and when you have functional systems, they are always massively biodiverse. They have huge amounts of biomass, and they also have a huge amount of accumulated necromass. And so when you have a desert situation, you have to kind of look back, maybe here in the Sinai, 8,000 years ago, and it was the land of milk and honey, and that is not what it is today. And so what's missing? It's biodiversity, biomass, and accumulated organic matter or necromass. And what we've seen in my research over the last 30 years is it's possible to rehabilitate large-scale damaged ecosystems, including ecosystems that have been degraded over long historic time and over vast areas. So this is what we know can create an oxygenated atmosphere on the only planet we know that has one, that can create, constantly filter, and continuously renew the freshwater system and build fertile organic soils which nurture all life. and it comes from this amazing biodiversity. So this is natural regulation of the hydrological cycle, the weather, and the climate. And no machine that we can make can do better than this. And that's what we need to do to restore the planet entirely. Actually, I believe ecological function should become the central intention of human civilization and the central basis of global economy. If ecological function is the basis of the economy, all human effort will go to restoring and maintaining and protecting our Earth.
Thank you very much. And if I may, I'd like to throw a second question at you. We are in the middle of a very exciting decade, the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, and there is an advisory board for this. And I'd like to ask you if you could tell our audience a little bit more about the UN Decade and its role in this huge, huge process and endeavor that we are on.
Well, I think make sure there's no audio. Turn off the audio, please. On that, no audio. And then just roll it. So I would say that what you said first was that restoration is only a small part of the COP. So this means that the COP is not actually about restoring ecological function. It's not about re-regulating the hydrological cycle or soil fertility or the oxygenated atmosphere. And when we understand what is photosynthesis, what is carbon sequestration, then we see that only the poorest people and those people and youth who choose to plant trees are the ones who are actually doing the most to re-regulate the climate. And when we understand that the value of the oxygenated atmosphere, the value of the soils and the biodiversity is much higher, then we have a different way forward. And the decade for ecosystem restoration is a recognition from science and from policy and soon from finance that this is the way forward for human civilization. So we now have a mechanism to take people and to take policymakers and take financial institutions to all come together to realize that every human being and all non-human living beings are in the same situation. The quality of life for the future depends on understanding that the life support systems on the earth are the basis of our living systems, and that we have to restore them. We can't restore them by having electric cars or by having windmills or by having internet or computers, because they're biological living systems. And so when we talk about windmills or computers or electric cars, we're talking about abiotic systems, which requires to extract more resources from the earth, to use tremendous amounts of energy and make emissions and toxic pollution. And what we really need is to understand that the earth systems are the basis of life. And when we understand that, then everything becomes a little more clear. And we can realize that every human being on the planet has a birthright. How is it possible that people are landless? How is it possible that people have no jobs or have no access to food or land? It's only from the domination of cultures that have done this to people over hundreds and thousands of years. And when we understand that hundreds and thousands of years is just a second in evolutionary time or in Earth time, and that every living being is an expression of the cosmic energy. We're stardust. We're magical, and we're alive, and we're part of an eternal system of life. And when we fail to understand that, and we believe that we're consumers, or we're supposed to be workers who are enriching a few giant billionaires, but the rest of us are slaves or serfs or something, it's just fundamentally wrong. Everyone who's alive is equal, and all living things have the right to life. And when we define things as monetary commodities, we need ecological function. There are no ecosystem services. That's an anthropogenic manipulation of a concept to say that you can buy it and sell it. The ecological function on the earth is life itself. It's in Chinese, it's qi, and this qi is life's energy, and that life's energy can be brought together as the young people are doing to plant trees. And when it's brought together and it has a common intention, it's very strong. But now the common intention is to build more giant buildings. And those giant buildings are pyramids. They're ruins. When you look later, 1,000 years from now, the archaeologist will be looking at ruins, and they'll say, what were these people thinking? There's toxic materials. Of course their civilization ended, because it's toxic. We need to live in a beautiful, what God made in this world, a living network of all life, massively biodiverse, fertile, and nurturing. So this is what I think the decade of ecosystem restoration is not about institution building. We don't need institutions. We need everyone to have a common understanding, to have consciousness about what is the purpose of life and what we should be doing, and how we should treat one another and how we should treat the earth. And if we have that consciousness, then the earth will show us its abundance and its beauty.
Thank you very much. Everything is said, I think. We could end it here. But thank you so much for saying, for really laying a great foundation and providing some context for us and the conversation. Philip, welcome to the panel. I'm glad you could make it a little bit earlier than what we expected. I'd like to next pass it on and speak about young people. John spoke about shared understanding and bringing together loads of people, which is what the decade is trying to do. An international student association, Forestry Student Association, is doing exactly that. So I'd like to ask you to speak on the role of young people in this restoration movement. And what do you think youth innovation means in the process? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the question, and I would love to say that when we are talking about youth, when I mention youth, we are talking about the generation which was born in the same time with the great technological progress, and those skills of using the tools and its understanding is essential for young people. Bringing this knowledge into the process of restoration makes it more efficient, and it allows us to use tools in original ways, innovative ways. And when we are talking about the special role of youth that youth are playing in the restoration, I would like to say that youth are bringing new ideas, fresh look at the old challenges and original solutions for current situations.
Thank you so much. And then my follow-up question would be, what is the association doing? What are the young people that you work with? What do you do on a day-to-day basis? What is maybe your longer-term vision, if you could share that with the audience as well, especially since there are so many young people in the room?
Thank you. Yes, so as an international forestry student association which unites more than 20,000 students from forestry fields all around the globe to bring the importance of forest restoration and sustainable development is one of our main responsibilities. Behind every restoration project, a great amount of work is standing, which includes monitoring, planning, modeling, and deep understanding of ecosystem concepts, which requires educational background. That's exactly the place where IFSA plays its role. But there is a question, how we can deliver all the international goals to all our members, to every forestry student. And in this part, our association was achieving, in the past, our association was achieving these goals through the in-person meetings. But unfortunately, not everyone can attend such events. So we used modern tools to make education available for everybody. Thus, the IFSA Tree Learning Platform appeared. This platform was made to respond to the needs of forestry students to fill in gaps left by their formal education. The platform includes two main sections, soft skills and forestry topics. In soft skills section, we can find the educational materials on how to write a motivation letter, how to prepare your CV, and how to prepare your performance for public speaking. These topics have a high importance in terms of increasing the presence of youth in forestry-related sectors and engagement of youth in the decision-making processes. And then the forestry topic section, which consists of the educational materials on climate change, indigenous people and community forestry, and similar topics. This part is aimed to share the knowledge and awareness of global challenges that we are facing right now and prepare young people to deal with them. For now, it's available on the IFSA website for every IFSA member, and the next step to improve the platform will be to add the educational materials, which aims to achieve the COP27 goals. Furthermore, such tools as the social medias, websites, and streaming platforms give us incredible opportunities to extend our network, organize the meetings all around the globe, and provide the educational hub for young professionals. The restoration topic is one of the most important in today's agenda, but behind it is always education, where IFSA is playing an important role as a current, as a center of excellence in the finding of the best available practices and creating a world that appreciates forests.
Thank you so much. Super comprehensive, and you make my job very easy to keep everyone on time. Thank you so much. You spoke about building a platform, and Fernando, that is exactly what you work on, and we put on your little name tag that you work for 1t.org. Could you explain, for those in the room who don't know what that is, what exactly that stands for, and then how we just heard also that we live in a time of great technological advance, how you use that in the restoration agenda. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So, first of all, once I'm here at COP27, I was surprised about all this narrative about net zero pledges. As we all know, it's about decarbonizing as much as we can, and what we can, this amount, we have to compensate it. So this narrative is fully supported on ecosystem restoration. But what I see here is that actually this dialogue, this conversation are not taking place as much as we should have it. So basically the 1 Trillion Trees platform, together with Uplink from the World Economic Forum, they open up this space, they open a call for youth called the Youth Restoration Challenge, that basically collect different stories for around the world, from mangrove restoration in Ghana to coral reefs in Australia. In my case, I'm restoring Mediterranean forest in Spain. So basically, they collect all those stories and help them to elevate the message first, they make a lot of capacity building workshops. The World Economic Forum network is, it's very big, so at the end, we are able to be in contact with strategic people that can help our initiatives. So then secondly, they also help to mobilize some funding to this project. to elevate the impact. And finally, elevate the voice, and also that helps a lot to share knowledge. And I'm so happy that I've been able to be here at COP27 and meet other top link innovators, as they call us. You know, share our on-the-ground experiences. Actually, Ibrahim is here. We'll talk about that. So yes, kind of the support I am receiving and my team in the University of Granada, we are developing this process for make drone sowing for regenerating forest feasible. So basically we use artificial intelligence to prioritize areas for restoration. And once we have this strategic spot, we send a drone that drop a seed that has been pre-treated before. And hopefully with this pre-treatment, the seed will become an adult tree and it will become an entire forest, because that's the fact, not just planting trees, but actually a growing forest. So at the end, just to sum up, the One Trillion Trees movement is trying basically to generate this community and mainstream the restoration ideas into the general agenda, because actually we need it. We need this revolution of restoration. Actually, we have already had another revolution, the industrial revolution, so now we need the regeneration revolution, and make us the idea as a society that is, if we conserve our water, we regenerate our soils, we're taking care of ourselves and also taking care of those that we love. No.
Thank you so much. You gave us a really beautiful, maybe a very beautiful quote to walk out with today. You spoke of a revolution of restoration. I really like that, and that we need a generation or many generations of people working on ecosystem restoration. You spoke about capacity building workshops, the importance of dialogue, and also, very interesting technological tools that you use. With that, I'd like to hand it over to you, Gretna, to speak on the TreeMapper platform, which is also, it was in the title of today's event. What does the TreeMapper app do? How did Plant for the Planet develop that, and how is it used on a day-to-day basis?
Thank you very much, Yule. Maybe Chris can help present the slide that we have. Okay, I think, no, I think it is not the correct slide. Hold on. Let me come to the screen, or I can share with you another link, Chris, if you're able to. Let me put the link on the maybe the home page of the slide, so you can open it from there directly. That might be easiest. Can you try opening the link that's on the first slide? I think that is the. Yeah. Okay. I'm quite sure it's accessible to. Okay, try refreshing it again. Yeah, perfect. I think it's the presenting is from the right, now the left corner where it says slideshow. Yeah, that should work. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, So to maybe if we, through this PPT, we are trying to walk you through what Plant for the Planet is doing on the TreeMapper app. And the first slide essentially is an overview of some of our activities that we have been doing, and to point out that the areas of work that we have ranged from advocacy, education, empowerment of children, research, and then app is empowerment of youth and children, and then app happens to be one of the core areas of work that we do. So as you can see probably in this sort of a summary slide, that over the course of the last 13 years, Plant for the Planet has worked to empower more than 88,000 children that have been peer-to-peer trained. So that means trained through in-person workshops and discussions to be empowered on climate change topics, and then a series of activities that we have been doing, of which app or the TreeMapper app is what I would be talking about today very briefly. If we can go to the next slide. One thing we wanted to maybe go down, to share was that in a report that was published in 2019, Plant for the Planet was credited as one of the groups that were responsible for the strike movement that happened in Europe. And especially in 2019, when young people were on the streets striking, they did a whole research, and we just wanted to share that. And if we go down again. Very quickly, the Trillion Tree app, or the TreeMapper app we have, is an open source app, and it derives its sort of essence, and I think you must have seen that in the video, that the Tom Crowther, the Crowther Lab research, which was funded at ETH Zurich, found out that there are 3 trillion trees that already exist. If we go to the next slide. And there is a room for around 1.2 more trillion trees, which of course have to be planted, and it's not just about planting them, but also ensuring that they're able to grow and sustain for a period of time in order to be as effective as an actual tree, where we count the emission reductions, among other things. If we keep going down, you would see slides of where the Trillion Tree campaign itself was launched at a Plant Ahead event back in 2018. The next slide has a little bit of media coverage that we have had over the course of last 3 to 4 years on this topic from different groups. And if you go down again, then what we can see is one of the flagship projects that we have been doing is in Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. And if we keep scrolling down, you would see that this particular project, or the plantation, employs over 35 people that are working there with over 1.1 tree that is planted every 15 seconds. Keep scrolling down, Chris. Yeah. So those are, some of the key highlights that we have been doing. And of course, as you may see in the next slide, you would see that there is a change chocolate that we used to have at every COP. We do not have them this year because of course, logistical challenges that happened with Egypt. So if you're missing the COP chocolates, we would have them back next year. But we've also been running a campaign that talks about if there is no change, there is no chocolate, obviously. And I think Yule mentioned that in the opening as well. Going down specifically for the app itself, it is open source and a transparent app. And it is aiming towards, and if we keep scrolling down, you would see it allows organizations. So the key point about this app is that it allows individuals, but also organizations, which means community-based organizations or small organizations which may not even have proper mechanisms to operate or even be at times registered as a proper NGO in different countries, to be able to register their projects and receive direct donations. This is one of the key aspects that has been developed, and therefore it is a platform that allows a small-scale organizations. So even if it's a small organization based in Africa or in Asia Pacific, to be visible, to be featured, and where they can receive donation of trees in form of the funding that is provided to them, and each of the different projects or organizations can actually price their trees or their plantations at different scales as to what they're able to do. And then if you go down, it also allows a live GPS tracking. We normally do a full experiment when we make this presentation, where you actually keep a tree in the room and then you register that tree on the app on live, and then you're able to see how the app itself is able to identify a tree in that location and able to point it. So we're not able to do this here, but just to point out that that is that you can register the number of trees, including with the exact classification of what there is, and it is able to then automatically verify that and where you exactly are and pin those particular tree or trees that are registered in order to track them. If we go down, then you would see, Chris, for the next slide. It is also possible to gift trees and have satellite imageries. We also have ways for where you can have leaderboard and competitions among things. And I think in the next slide you would see, which is really key to our work, is that we have now employed satellite imagery in the new version of the app that was rolled out, which basically allows for high resolution image to show and calculate the forest growth. So that means it's not possible to just, report what does not exist. It's actually possible to verify it through the satellite imagery of that page. And if you go down, you would see, and in order to prevent misreporting and allow standardized evaluation, we have essentially updated how we are able to verify the actual presence of the trees on the ground. And of course, in the subsequent version of the app, we are also aiming for randomized reporting and verification to also be made available. And then if you keep going down, you will see a little bit more features about what are some of the expert reviews, what are the approach that we have taken when it comes to the app. And I think in the next slide you would see the approach where it's managed, and A Plant for the Planet does not charge any commission for the donations that are made on the platform. So that means that if somebody is donating to any of the organizations in the Global South, all of that funding goes directly to them, and that is a way to enable grassroots restoration efforts from our end. If you go down, at the moment we have close to, well, it's a statistics from 2019, more than 60 projects back then, and I can already confirm that we have at least over 500 projects that are registered on the platform. And I think just last year, if not mistaken, close to between 5 to 10 million of donations were channeled through the app platform itself online, in order to make sure that the plantations and the funding was reaching those efforts. With this, this is essentially the last slide, and I also see the time running out, so I'll conclude here, but just to point out that this is one of the projects that we have undertaken in order to support the restoration work, and this app is designed and managed by all young people from different continents, so that is another thing we want to highlight. These are all young developers coming from youth background, and all of them are managing and coordinating this. Thank you, Yule.
Thank you so much, Yugratna. Yugratna and I also have the same boss in Sanama. This might seem like a corporate pitch, but I think I'm convinced time and time again by how great this is. Thank you so much, Yugratna. And last, Philip, thank you so much for joining us in your busy schedule as the head of the Stockholm Environment Institute in Africa. You were involved in I understand you were involved in the Stockholm Plus 50 process, so that's focused on sustainable development, and restoration, of course, plays a role in the process or in the endeavor. So we would like to ask you how the restoration agenda was prioritized in the Stockholm Plus 50 process. And also because we spoke so much about young people, about building capacity, young professionals, helping them with research practically, but also with soft skills, where you see, so that's two questions in one, what you see the role of the research community to be. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Maybe just to clarify what Stockholm Plus 50 is, because I may not assume that everybody knows, but the fact is it's only in 1972 that the United Nations brought into its program and agenda the issue of environment. And this happened because the government of Sweden hosted the first United Nations Conference on Human Environment in Stockholm. Now, because we're in 2022, we have been reflecting back the last 50 years. And so the United Nations held a 50-year reflection conference called Stockholm Plus 50 on the 2nd and 3rd of June this year. So why is restoration important? So the conference itself was not a conference to adopt any new decisions. Rather, it was a conference to look at what has been achieved over the past 50 years. And I must say that just the scorecard is very, for lack of a better word, is very depressing. My organization, together with the Stockholm Environment Institute, together with the Center for Energy and Environment and Water of India, were tasked with developing a science report for the meeting. And one of the things we looked at was to look through all the hundreds and hundreds of agreements that have been signed and commitments on environment and sustainable development. And only out of our hundreds, only 10% of them did we find evidence that there have been full implementation or some efforts to do implementation. So 90% failure rates globally by the global community. And this is important because restoration is not covered as an agenda item or on its own, even though we talk about restoration, but elements of restorations are covered in some of the major agreements, including the UN Convention on Desertification, the UN Convention on Biodiversity, and now, of course, we are under the UN Convention on Climate Change, and many other regional conventions and agreements around the world. So that is, basically how restoration was very important as part of the discussion. But I must say that from a scientific point of view, we would also like to see a situation where, even though we focus a lot on restoration, there's still large parts of the world, particularly in Asia, Africa, Latin America, where we still have intact ecosystems managed sustainably by local and indigenous community. And for those places, we would like support to these community groups so that they continue to manage those systems sustainably, not degrading those systems, and then we come back to restoration. On your question about the youth, the Stockholm Plus 50, so one of the things we did for the first time when we were doing the science report was to commission a youth science report. So we had a team of young people, and Ugratna here was quite instrumental in helping mobilize that. They did a survey. Thousands of young people responded to that survey from 91 countries. They prepared their own youth report, which was submitted to the presidency of the meeting was co-chaired by Kenya and Sweden. And I think we saw, of course, I think two major outcomes. One, I think, is as part of the recommendation for the UN to establish a UN Youth Office, which I think has already been adopted by the General Assembly. But the other one also was a very strong call for environment as a human right, which again has also been adopted by the UN Environment Assembly. So I think that would be my initial sort of input on that. But I just wanted to say one other thing is that research is very important. And I think from what Ugratna presented, if you are doing large-scale campaigns of tree planting and tree growing, you need to do species matching. You need to know what kind of species do you plant in the right place, so we don't end up with invasive species and things like that. I mean, that's an important role that research plays. The other important role that research plays is also to bring up those issues that might not be immediately visible to policymakers. And just to give you an example, I mean, we have been doing some work on economics of land degradation in Africa. And again, connecting to the youth, I talk a lot about Africa because Africa is a continent currently of 1.2 billion people. 42% of 1.2 billion people in Africa are young people below the age of 15. So it's a very youthful continent. Of course, so is Asia and so on. So bringing the young people to the mainstream on this kind of discussion is very important. But Africa is losing annually $5.8 billion worth of economic loss because of soil erosion, by loss of critical minerals, including phosphorus and nitrate minerals. And these are very important for agriculture. And so this is not something that is visible to our economic policy makers. So research, again, becomes very important, because as we do this kind of studies, we can then be able to demonstrate that, without investing in restoration, without investing in, soil management, we are actually paying a lot more cost in terms of inability to produce optimal in terms of the food productivity, and then that's affecting food production. So I just wanted to give that example as a start.
Thank you so much for those remarks. I'd like to pose a question to all our panelists now, basically asking a question around the title of the event. I'll read it out. You have received it also, and it's in front of you. It's a tough question, so I'll read it out very slowly. I'd like to ask you how education and technology help to overcome the problems faced by people who work in restoration efforts. And okay, you got yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yes. Thank you very much, Yule, for that question. I think we have seen that this particular COP had a huge theme of pay up for loss and damage, which was which has been mainstreamed. I think when it comes to how UN in general views efforts of communities and other groups, there is often a lack of seeing real people and real communities and real organizations to be actually involved in those efforts. If UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration has done quite a lot when it comes to making sure that different groups are engaged, but it has happened after 75 years of UN existing, and this decade should have been, have been existing at least 30 years ago if we wanted to prioritize these topics. We are doing it now in a way that we're already late. What we often see is that the policies that are being made today, whether that is within the UN context or in any multilateral context. World Economic Forum has been discussing so much about multi-stakeholder governance, but we do not actually see the people that are actually most impacted having any kind of say in those policies at all. Even in youth space, there is often a notion of there is a different sometimes categories of youth that the youth that are from accredited organizations, youth that are from large organizations, and then youth that come from marginalized communities, and the groups that are most affected, they don't really even get recognized in the system, and that is something we have to fundamentally change. United Nations and this conference and its bodies are public spaces, which means that public in its own form of shape have equal rights to participate and engage. And I think this is where the restoration agenda, which actually is coming from the most impacted population, has a lot to bring and a lot to share. And this is exactly how, some of my pointers at least on how we can make sure that they are included in our local solutions. But just to point out that it cannot happen without the people whose problems we are discussing about. So maybe some pointers from my end to start discussion on this. Thank you.
So thanks. Yeah, I fully agree with you, Uganda. I'll go back to the idea of the cultural revolution we need. So we need from everyone, everywhere, to change our minds and realize that actually we don't just need to regenerate the earth, but we also can do it. I think that all of us, we are unique, and so are our skills and our capacities. So we need all those capacities on the table to translate into finally in actions. So especially in the youth, I think there's a huge potential to be unlocked yet, because when we talk about landscape restoration, it's a long-term process. It takes from one generation to 2 generations to fully or at least partially recover the ecological functions of an ecosystem. So we need to unlock these capabilities of the future decision makers that will be on these landscapes. I've been for 5 years running a ecosystem restoration project, and it's not easy at all. I mean, restoration is so difficult. The first year we planted 2,000 trees, which is nothing in comparison, especially with this big organization of Plan for the Planet. But we got a great lesson. The first year we planted so many trees, and almost 5% survived. So we learned that nature actually doesn't plant trees. Nature sow the trees. So the next year we use the seeds, and we realized that the first year the seed can create a 1.5 meter root system that actually it helps the plant to get access to the water and survive in the summer, especially in dry areas as the Mediterranean forests are. So that's in terms of ecological knowledge. We need to create and educate people, and to become better scientists, better decision makers, and better civil society in general. But also ecological and social aspects. We like to talk about governance, because ecosystem restoration, there's a huge social dimension that it's about engaging private companies, engaging public administration, civil society, academia, and talk the same language with all of them, and create a shared pathway toward a common vision that is basically is align our collective intelligence. We are so we can create amazing things, but align them with the natural potential of nature itself to regenerate itself. So put all the pieces together and align this in a shared pathway. And to end that, sorry, that's related to education. So technology, actually, I like to see technology not as a very end, but as a tool. So technology can make the process more effective, more precise, even can make it cheaper, and actually can make it at wider scale. That's something we need. But I don't like to get lost in the words of technology and just see technology as as a piece of the whole process of ecosystem restoration. Thanks.
Yes, I would totally agree. And what we have seen now is that people in all continents are interested to restore their own ecosystems, but they need a tremendous amount of knowledge in order to do this. So by creating ecosystem restoration camps and communities, we can have living laboratories which can share information around the world and that can engage the university systems. And as laboratories, graduate students can come and participate in larger scale activities with lots of people who are going to continue their work. And that we can see that there's been a lot of discussion about tree planting and this sort of thing. But actually, we really need to understand the role of the hydrological cycle, the role of the soils. We need to understand about microbial communities and fungal communities. And we need to understand the relationship between humans and these non-human systems. So these are not theoretical. If you sit in a classroom in a city and you talk about it, it's not nearly as effective as when you're in an ecosystem restoration camp or community where you're growing soils, where you're actually looking into the microscope at your own indigenous microbial communities, and you're understanding what makes them healthy and grow and when they're dying. So, this is not easy, as he said, but it is doable. And when you understand that it's doable and you get the community together, they can do collaborative inquiry for collective intelligence. And when they do this, they all know what they're doing. And there's not a need for like someone to tell people, do this, do that, because everybody knows what they're doing. And the more they do it, the better they get at it. And then when we realize that this is the highest possible value, that we need a naturally regulated, oxygenated atmosphere, a fresh water system, and fertile soils, and that there is no product shipping giant containers of plastic stuff back and forth to be bought and sold in big shops is never going to help us to deal with these problems of climate change or intense and erratic weather events. But ordinary people in their communities working on soil restoration, working on infiltration and retention of moisture, of growing high canopies that hold moisture close to the earth, this is what will save us. So in this, everyone can participate, but we have to value that and value that higher than buying and selling things, and certainly higher than speculation between the cost and price of things and interest-bearing debt, which are imaginary constructs which have been imposed on the whole world now and are essentially like indentured servitude. So if we understand that this is not a real thing, but the earth is a real thing, and the air is a real thing, and the water is a real thing, and the microbes and fungus and animals, and that everyone has the right to life. So we can't deny the right to life and say, well, you don't have any money, so you're nothing. That's incorrect. We have to have this transformation now, and then everyone's efforts will go to restoring the earth.
Yeah, I just want to pick from John's point and add two things. I think the one thing we need to know is that tree planting is just one part of the restoration campaign, but we need to see nature as a multifunctional system. And I think John is putting it in the right way. So beyond the biophysical system, which is the tree planting and the water and everything else, you have the socio-ecological system, which is the people and the knowledge they have and the interaction with technologies and so on. And without paying attention to that, that is why we have in many parts of the world, many projects which have failed, because you can have all the right technology to do all the biophysical metrics and everything else, but if you don't understand the socio-ecological systems and the socio-economic dynamics, livelihoods of communities, then it becomes very difficult for this kind of traction. So you need a process that's very bottom up. And the other thing I wanted to say is there are also parts of the world where, trees play an essential role, but you also have to look at, grasslands, for example. So, I work a lot in agro-pastoral systems and pastoral systems, which large parts of Central Asia, West Asia, the Sahelian belt of Africa and the Horn of Africa. The challenge we're facing there right now is actually because of species lost, some of the vegetation or grasses that are very important as pasture for animals are no longer there. And so the communities need to start receding, and we don't have receding, we don't have the species themselves. Some of them are still there, but some of them are not there. So the whole campaign as to investing in tree planting should also be broadened enough to say, let's invest in the kind of vegetation types that are relevant for different global ecosystems. And when John talks about living laboratories, I think it's very important, because as a world, we've now, we have a central depository of biological repository in Norway. But if you go to many countries, including in Africa, few of them have seed banks. Why are we not investing in seed banks for this kind of seeds that would need to do restoration? And that's where we need to take the conversation. And I wanted to bring in again, just to emphasize this aspect of multifunctionality. It is very important that we make sure that we understand multifunctionality of ecosystems and the interconnectedness with the socio-ecological system. Otherwise, we will actually have a lot of challenges in terms of really getting success towards this initiative that we are supporting. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I would like to say that I agree with everything that was said previously, and maybe I would like to say shortly about the benefits which technologies are bringing to our organization and other things that was already mentioned, and I think it's really important. So using the modern technologies and modern tools, we can distribute the information, educational materials, or announce the need for the support for the specific project, as was mentioned before with the TreeMapper. And thus, students can get skills for the proper involvement in the projects. Scientists will get publicity and support from the population, which is needed to achieve our goals. And all of us are getting tools to bring our ideas into the world. So technologies unite us, allow us to work together in diverse group to achieve the common goals that all of us have to come for. And thus, all the aspects of restoration can get the needed attention and be covered, which allow us to overcome the current challenges and implement the restoration projects in the most efficient way. That was my answer. Thank you.
If I could just add something to this, one of the things that we're finding in ecosystem restoration camps is that the highest level of this is botanical sanctuaries. That once you get the community to understand that they're extremely endangered species, then they can gather the DNA from this and they can propagate and plant it out. So they can become seed banks and legacy genomes. There's another thing which is critically important now that ecosystem restoration can also do, is that the world is facing an enormous food security crisis, especially here in Africa. And when we talk about, we're worried about 1.5 to 2 degrees centigrade changes in 2050, or, you know, it seems a little bit further out. But the famine is now. There's a war in Ukraine and Russia. That wheat is 80% of the wheat that's been used in Egypt, for instance. Although Egypt is making immediate efforts to change from that kind of wheat to other types of wheat. But some other places, large refugee camps, for instance, or other places in the Sahel, which are massively degraded, they're not in the same position. They're going to have extreme difficulties. And when talking to the World Food Program, they say that even if the countries give 100% of the funding that they've pledged, they'll only have 50% of the funds needed to deal with the problem. So if we immediately link ecosystem restoration together with food insecurity, we could help solve two problems at the same time. And the immediacy of the possibility of famine can help to have greater action. And we can mobilize the people who are most at risk to do the restoration. By paying them to do the restoration, they'll be able to feed themselves, because we're talking about agroecological restoration, regenerative agriculture, food forests, and this kind of work. So if we put it all together in one thing, we need to say this loudly, amplify this message, because if the United Nations and the other groups understand that there is an entry point which helps to deal with this immediate problem and creates a long-term solution so that there won't be famine in the future by restoring ecological function over large areas. So this climate mitigation and adaptation is also the answer to the immediate food insecurity problem.
Thank you. Thanks to all our panelists for responding to this tough question, which I'm sure could be a PhD in itself. We have about 10 minutes for questions. If one of our members of the audience has a burning question, otherwise maybe you can catch our panelists afterwards as well. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, and I really want to appreciate all the panelists for the great work you're doing and for your presentation. I was looking at the Plant the Planet app, and I saw that the country I came from, which is Ethiopia, is stood third because we planted 1.7 trees, and China and India on top. And I scrolled down and I saw that there are only 50 countries, and the last one is 9 million. So what is showing me is that the kind of efforts that we're doing may not be really well distributed enough to sensitize each country to get to the 1 trillion plan that we're having. So what are you guys doing to really sensitize each country to be part of this very, very interesting initiative? This is my first question. And the second question is, what are you doing to link these plantings with nutrition, like in planting trees that are going to contribute to nutritional outcomes? Because I'm coming from a nutrition background, and I really want to understand if this planting has really direct relationship with nutrition or just only restoration. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your question. Yeah, we'll take another one.
Okay, thank you very much. I am Joshua Aita. I'm from Uganda. So quite often we hear narratives about tree planting, and it's quite concerning because each time people tend to go for tree planting activities, it's just more of planting, but there is no much compliance that is made with regards to following up. So how do we change these narratives from actually tree planting to tree growing? Right now we talk about countries or people are talking about planting millions of trees. The word planting is out there, but then how do we get people back on track to know that it's actually tree growing? Because it's about nurturing what we've actually planted to ensure that it moves it stays for longer periods. Thank you.
We'll take a third question, and then I'll bring it back to the panel. I hope you're taking notes. Thank you.
I'm Lansinato from Burkina Faso. I want to say you thank you for your speech at a very, very, very high level. But I want to say something. I'm from Burkina Faso in the Sahel region. Plant trees is not enough because we have to take care. And to take care is so expensive. It is a very real problem in the Sahel region. For making funding, you have to have another fund to take care of the trees. It is very, very expensive. It is that the problem of Sahel region. It is to resolve the societal problem of the people in a region, in a Sahel region, to take care of the tree and to live from these planting trees. Thank you.
Thank you so much. 3 tough questions. We have about 10 minutes to answer them. We can maybe start, Ukraina, do you want to, we can just work our way this way, and all panelists are allowed to respond to all 3 questions.
Thank you so much, and our Plan for the Planet colleagues will resonate. We are used to being questioned about the app and the work and everything. So thank you so much for your question. And I think for the part about where what can be done to mobilize more countries to do it, I think a lot of this lies in advocacy aspect, of course, that how do you convince governments to be able to do those plantations. And I think a lot of this also is in what is the Article 5 of the Paris Agreement, or 4, which is on LULUCF, which is not that much operationalized yet. And it's about financing, it's about forestry and land use, but we do not see that much discussion happening on those topics. At the end of the day, I think it really comes down to political will and leadership. Countries have to begin seeing unused natural resources as assets rather than something that they can exploit for, monetary gains, and begin to see the value of reforestation beyond just as an offsetting scheme, but as something that actually helps have lot of co-benefits, as we call them. You pointed out nutrition, and there are many more co-benefits of plantations that take place. About the nutrition, I'll be happy to maybe look more into it, especially with our projects in Mexico and other places, as to what we are doing. Although I can already point out that we have also been looking into the agroforestry aspect in our work, where you can have forestry which is not just there for commercial purposes or for purposes of just being there, but also how it benefits the community, of which of course nutrition then plays an important role. I can check and get back to you as to what species exactly we have been planting, at least from the projects that are coming. And I know that within the reporting that's there for each of the organizations on the app, they also have to report which species of trees that are there. So for example, if there is a project in India that is planting 10 or 10,000 mango trees, then they're able to report that it's mango, and how many trees are there and where they are. I think that would be the answer to the question to us. Yeah.
Okay, so well, I think you are raised a very interesting topic, which is how do we distribute the restoration efforts globally? Because by now, my perception is that we are distributing it with the carbon crisis in mind, the climate change crisis. So that means that we better plant in the tropics because the trees grow faster and accumulate more carbon. But actually, if we take into consideration the two other crises we are living at the same time, which is biodiversity crisis, first, so we can't afford to lose any biodiversity anywhere. So we should also restore dry areas. Maybe the carbon store is not as much as in rainforest, but we also need that biodiversity. And secondly, the poverty crisis. Actually, many of the global restoration efforts, as the Bond Challenge, the UN, all these big top-down approaches are planning to restore the tropics, environments in which actually the population is growing a lot. So that means that maybe we are hitting a conflict between the ecosystem restoration initiatives and also agriculture. So maybe we are planting in places that actually people need that places for growing food. So definitely we should take these three crises into consideration. We're talking about restoration, and actually it allows me to connect with the second point, which is how do we transcend from tree plantation to tree growing? And I would say it's not just about planting trees. I mean, when we talk about restoration, you can maybe not plant even one tree and you are restoring. For example, there's this initiative is called Dig It. They dig holes and it retains the water. And once you have some wet conditions, you can leave the plants naturally grow. Or even you can, for example, in savannas, you don't have to plant trees. Actually, if you plant trees, you can liberate carbon from the soil, very rich carbon soils. So I would say that as an ending point that we need to restore, not plant trees. So restore means first observe the ecosystem, understand the ecosystem, ecological dynamics, and then just give space and a hand if it needed, nature to regenerate itself. And I think that's the good direction to do.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much for the questions, and I would just agree with the previous speaker on the way of the restoration that the ecosystem has also the dynamics to restore itself. So it's not every time about the planting trees, but providing the conditions which will be which will support the ecosystem functions and allow the ecosystem restore itself and develop it back. Thank you.
No, I think mine is simple. I think I'll combine both questions. My colleague from Burkina Faso and from Ethiopia. I mean, I talked about socio-ecological context. So, and this is what I'm trying to say. Sometimes it makes sense to do agroforestry because maybe some of the agroforestry trees would meet the the food needs or nutritional needs of communities, but even for livestock, for example. I mean, you have agroforestry trees that are providing, feed for livestock, and so that's why one thing I wanted to talk about. But on the coast also, again, if you work with farmers and people on the ground, then if the trees they're planting would benefit them, they will invest in them because they see the benefits. And you have from Burkina Faso, we have amazing story, farmer managed natural regeneration, in the Burkina Faso, in Mali, across that region. And this is millions of hectares that have been planted by farmers, not because somebody gave them money from international communities, because they themselves are regenerating their farms and they're finding benefit from, from this investment. So that's a very unique story because it is from the farmers themselves. It's not somebody coming and say, plant trees because we want carbon. The ecosystem is a multifunction ecosystem. You have to understand it within a socio-ecological system, so you have to work with the farmers on the ground so that they invest in what makes sense for them. Thank you for raising that.
Yes, I totally agree with what was just said. The communities need to be in the lead, and the agencies and finance and technical support must be in service of what the communities decide. And this is what we've seen in the ecosystem restoration camps movement, that the communities choose to come together to do this for their own purposes, and their consciousness becomes higher, and they have a relationship between the elders and the youth, and they can all work together. I'd also say that in the crisis that's coming with the famine, it's important that the agencies are in service of the communities, because the communities can actually deal with this because they want to take care of their families and each other. Nobody from far away bringing some food from another part of the world is going to be better than helping these communities to grow their own food, to restore their hydrology, and to especially make sure that everyone is fed. And that means that whenever there's food, it's all shared. If you don't have this sharing, and that's what's not going to take place in these other top-down ideas. The other thing I would add to the question is, where do we do restoration? Interesting thing about massively degraded landscapes is that in the tropics, things grow fast, but they also cycle carbon rapidly, and the soils are very thin because there's carbon release very quickly. In the dryland areas that are totally degraded, you have almost a 100% upside. So if you restore these areas, there's a lot more room for growth, and the carbon in the soil is vastly more than the carbon in the vegetation itself. So it's like either 1 to 3 or 1 to 4. So you could have at the highest point, you could have a factor of 5 increases in carbon in massively degraded soils. So this is very interesting for you working in drylands. So don't just focus. And I see Tony Ronaldo we've just been mentioning farmer-led natural regeneration. He is the master of bringing that. So hello and thank you. Community development from the bottom, demanding answers and support.
Thank you all so much for responding so eloquently to questions that were put to you on the spot. We do have to vacate the room, but I'd like to say a huge thank you to all of you, and also to the audience for joining us and asking these questions. And I think what I take away from this, and again, you said it so much better than what I could, but that it's not easy but doable, I think you said, John. We mentioned collective intelligence multiple times, so then this is the right decade to do this. and that, yeah, I like the idea that Fernando planted, the seed that Fernando planted, that we need a restoration revolution, peaceful and green and colorful one. And with this beautiful image, I'd like to close. Oh, Yukratna, yes, please.
I was thinking we can all take a photo here on the stage with all the participants and the panelists, maybe before exiting.
As a fun end to this, thank you, Yukratna.
So
Yes, then the
everyone, if you
audience is
can come
invited to
over
join
here
us
at the stage
in
behind.
front
Yeah.
with these experts. Thank you.
We would invite everybody to join us on the stage at the back.
So maybe I can give you my email.
Absolutely, please, yes.